Kick-hank. You know you love it. Everybody loves the kick-hank in these streets. There it is. You guys ready? I'm going to reel it in. Well, hello. And welcome back, you guys, to Pencil to Pencil, Live, live. And you know what? If Pencil to Pencil's on your video scope, that means it must be Wednesday, 8 p.m. EDT, EST, ET. I don't know what it is. Did they change the meridian or something? Like it used to be EST, now it's EDT. I don't know what the D means.
Daylight.
Eastern Daylight, but before it was standard.
Yeah, I think it depends. That's where you are in the time change. If you've moved the clocks one way or the other, it's one way before the clock change, another way after.
Huh? They mess with my emotions. But but I digress. Guys, welcome back. This is Live Without a Safety Net. Expert Shop Talk brought to you every Wednesday by expert cartoonists. Pitch me, I must be dreaming. Let me introduce myself. I'm your first host. I am known in these streets. Well, I was going to do a whole thing. I'm going to stop myself. I am a cartoonist by trade, on the board of the National Cartoonist Society and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. But in the traditional book space, they call me an author illustrator. You know, we're still kind of unicorns over there. I think we'll talk about that tonight. But my name is JAMAR Nicholas. Leon the Extraordinary is a series I do for Scholastic under the graphics imprint. The next book in the series, Leon, Worst Friends Forever, in stores October 1st. Pre-order it now, why don't you? Thank you so much. I've said enough. It's time to introduce the world heavyweight champion of webcomics. Get up, do the belt motion. You know what it is.
My back.
That's right. You went through too many tables. He is known on the internet as Stone Cold Steve Conley. What up, Steve Conley?
Hello, guys. Good to see you.
Well, hello.
What a beautiful Wednesday. My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, your 87th favorite webcomic. It is available to read on Webtoons, Tapas, Go Comics, and on my own website at middleagecomic.com. Yes. I also make RPG stuff. If you play the Dungeons and the Dragons, you can check out my stuff at steveconley.com. And the latest one is called Nibblemancy, and that's kickstarting right now. It runs for another week, and so far it's doing great. Just doing great. Awesome. But I would be remiss, I think. I'd be very remiss if I did not introduce the Tower Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the maestro of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Good evening, everyone.
Well, hello, Mike Manley.
Hello. I draw The Phantom and Judge Parker, and I've been told I've also drawn your childhood. So if it's a little fuzzy around the edges, it's my fault.
Mike, there's nothing but great memories. Nothing but great memories.
Great. I'm glad.
Well, you know that your comic book faithful have a lot of great remembrances of the work you did at the time and are still doing. Because what are you currently doing, Mike Manley?
Well, like I said, I'm doing Judge Parker and I'm doing the Phantom.
Yes. And, Mike and I have tabled next to each other for a while, back when we were doing the con circuit. And I always kind of do the Miyagi smile when people come up to Mike, and I'm kind of like the, and they're like, people shaking. Mike, I just want to tell you about your run on so and so and such and such and such and such. And Mike is just like, thank you very much. Very humble man. Humble man.
Darkhawk is a lot of people's favorite character. A lot of people.
Yeah, I get that weekly. I get people telling me if I post something, especially on my Instagram, I get a lot of guys around your guys' age, maybe a little bit younger, going, "Oh, that was my first comic. That was my first comic. My grandma gave me that comic." So that was, the last era where you had, droves of young comic readers coming into comic book stores, or you could still find them even on the newsstand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any comics on newsstands now.
No, I think the last thing I remember being in a Barnes and Noble and like the underbelly rack near the magazines had like some comics. It was very random.
Yeah. Like Archies and Sonics and things like that.
And like Batman, maybe, or something like that. But yeah,
I think the last time was probably been 4 years since I was in a Barnes and Noble. In fact, that big Barnes and Noble in Philly is gone.
Yeah.
You didn't go in there for 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's weird that a lot of people would go there because they had a pretty large manga section, larger than any of the other comic stores in Philly. So a lot of people would go there to buy their manga. They wouldn't go to places like Fat Jack's, because I remember that the last time I was in Fat Jack's, which is probably easily 4 or 5 years ago, they didn't have any manga.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that I was paying attention, and Mike was there too. There's a Facebook thread that I've been following, and they were talking about just this. And this is kind of like the wagon wheel that always comes back around and comes back around. It's like, hey, how do we get kids in comic shops? Hey, your peanut butter is in my chocolate. We have the same conversation like every 6 months about what's broken and how we could fix this stuff. But I mean, one of the things that came up in that conversation was, and for any retailers who are watching can maybe chime in on this, is that it's not worth a lot of people's effort to stock things that you can get elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like, why have manga when you can go to the Kinokuniya and get it? You know what I mean? So I don't know, Mike.
But you know what? I never understood that, because every convenience store, every supermarket has milk. So Giant doesn't go like, well, we don't carry dairy products because you can get those at Acme. Right. I think really what it really is that comic book stores are run by the taste of the owner. And if the owner likes having kids come in and likes kids comics, they will stock that stuff. They'll have games. There's a retailer I've been going to since the 80s, guy Showcase, in a couple locations, and he had games way back in the day. He had a whole back of his store was like Dungeons and Dragons and all that, and they have a large kids section because they want anyone who's interested in comics, game, we're there. But I've been with others in other stores where it's basically Wolverine and Deadpool and Batman, and if it's not that, then they're not. I mean, I said on that thread we were talking about that it's basically the same way since the 90s, because when I was self-publishing, I called a bunch of comic book stores in person. We tried to get them, to carry my book. And there was two kinds of retailers. Over 90% were the first kind, which is, if it's not Marvel, DC, and Image, I don't care, right? And then about 10% would order stuff, and you cannot get those people to change what they would rather go out of business than literally, right? That's you know, they don't want kids coming in, they don't want kids in their store. You know, this is my taste. If you like what I like, I'm the store for you. If you don't like what I like, bye, see ya.
Yeah. And you know, I don't know a lot about it. I know a couple of retailers, and I know a lot of, and I want to get in the hot water because I'm not dunking. It's just kind of like thinking about where the mindset is when you decide to open up a comic book store. Some of the people who start out are like giant comic book collectors, and somebody says, "Hey, you should open up a store." You know what I mean? Which kind of
like that too.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but you know, so ahead they go, well, you know, like maybe I'll put my collection as the beginning of the store, and then I just branch out from there. And you're probably right. There's a lot of hard wired tastes, you know,
and that's the stuff they can sell because they like it. Like they're enthusiastic for it because they like it, and so the things that they're not enthusiastic for, self-fulfilling prophecy, they don't sell.
Right.
And so they don't stock it, and it creates this kind of recursive loop.
Yeah.
So I in that case, going into Fat Jacks, I went in with two young artists, right? And they're walking around. They go, well, they don't have any, you know, because they're not going to buy Batman. They're not going to buy Deadpool. They're not going to buy that. So what happened? I think I bought one or two things, and we went down to Barnes and Noble, and you know, most of the young people that I know, that's where they would go. They would not go to the comic book store because it didn't have what they wanted.
Yeah. Let's say some what's up to the chat. Hello, chat-a-roons. Billy Bob, what up, Billy Bob, who's a pencilier in good standing. Mike is onto something with the games and stuff at comic book stores. There's been conversations about the loss of spaces for kids and stuff and other spaces. And also, thanks, Billy Bob. Also, there's an idea about, we know our LCS, our local comic book store, but you also know about your FLGS, your friendly local game shop, right? And depending on where you are, maybe you don't have, you know, like in my area, Seventh Dimension Games is a gaming store. In a comic shop, there's really not one in the radius, so they can kind of have their own, you know, their own worlds. But you know, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to have all that in your store. Back when I was young, they had like Street Fighter cabinets in the comic book store. Put an arcade cabinet in your store and see how many kids show up. Well, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm talking about a '90s kid, but
I mean, I think it really comes down to the type of business person you are. You know, do you want people to come in like Starbucks? You can come in and sit there all day and drink a cup of coffee and use their free Wi-Fi because they figure in the long run that's going to earn them more money from you if there is a space, right? And you get used to that, right? And then you got other people like, you know, once you drink that cup of coffee, you better joink. You better get out. So yeah, and in my experience in the business, nothing has changed. The people that were open to it are still open to it. The people who are closed to it are still closed to it. I've never met somebody who goes like, well, I didn't used to like manga, but I love it now. It just seems like there's like camps, and people are sort of in those camps, and that's something about fandom in general, because comic book retailing is not like regular book retailing, right? Like I said, I think it's very different. It's basically run by the taste of the store owner. So if they're like a big 80s Marvel head, then that's what they're really going to be into, and they're not going to really be into any of the other stuff, you know. So it's like, I don't like chocolate milk, you know, so I'm not going to carry chocolate milk. You know, and if every third person comes in and goes, "Hey, do you have chocolate milk?" and they're like, "No, I don't like chocolate."
That always seems to work in comics for some reason, but you go out of business. It just, you know, I'm not going to have eggs here, but I have pancake mix and milk. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. I don't get it. But
Batman and X-Men have kept the lights on for 40 years, right? So there's a little bit of survival there.
Part of the thing you hear a lot now is that retailing is really tough now. It's always been tough, but it's really tough. And a lot of places have dimmed their lights. So, you know, and distribution has just become more and more and more bizarre to me over the course of the last 10 years. So now you used to have a monopoly, and now you have a bunch of different people in charge of distribution, some of which were not traditionally comic book distributors. So I heard that when Penguin was distributing the Marvel stuff would come in damaged
because they didn't know how to like.
Yeah.
They hadn't previously shipped collectibles.
Right. Yeah. So like, who cares if there's a big scar on the thing? You can still read it, right?
Well, not Dr. Francis that comes in and pulls every one of those books off the shelf.
I love that. I love that so much. The person who comes to your table at the convention, digs through to pick up one, and it holds up to the light.
And then you go, "Here, let me fix it for you."
A jeweler's loop. Looking at the
I think in 10 years, there's going to be landfulls of all these slabbed comics.
Oh, man.
Really do. You know, I remember the QVC selling all that stuff with certificates of authenticity, and it was the same thing. You know, people were going to be buying this. It was going to be an investment. Like the Thomas Kincaid print, you know.
So, all right, you know, guys, we've chatted way enough, and this is such a great conversation. But leading into that, which I think is very interesting, our guest tonight, Shane Clester, who is a good friend of mine, is going to give us another spoke in the wheel of cartooning. For the past, I don't know how many years, Shane's going to get mad at me, decade? I don't know how long. Shane's been doing a lot of license work, a lot of children's book illustration. And one thing that he's been prominently doing for maybe the past 8-9 years, you can tell me if I'm wrong, are adapting little golden books with a lot of licensed properties like X-Men 97, a lot of Marvel properties. And, you know, the little golden book is a staple of our childhood. Talk about nostalgia, right? You know, everybody had a little golden book in their library at some point, or even
the perky little puppy and
talking about distribution, they're still everywhere.
Yeah.
So that'll be the beginning of my primer. Shane's a fantastic illustrator and was gracious enough to come on when I asked, because you know, we've been turning our dials for a couple of months here. We want to try to keep giving you different spokes on this wheel of the cartooning industry. There's not just Deadpool, right? You know, everybody on the screen does a different type of comic, but they're still comics. And, you know, speaking to Shane about his career and kind of what he's been doing, how he does it, and where he's going, falls right in the line with what we're talking about. So Shane Clester, get ready for rendering. We're about to beam you in. You guys hold on to your pant loops. Let me get my stuff together. I'm just going to hold this out here. Work with me. We're live. All right. Welcome to Pencil, Shane Clester. Ping! Look at that.
Hey.
Hey, Shane. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, man. I hope you weren't falling asleep in the green room while we were kicking it.
No. I was getting having some anxiety hives and stuff. Like, we've been talking about this for decades. I was like, why can't we diversify? Why can't we get But luckily now that's not my problem.
So yeah, maybe we'll start right there. So Shane, did I get some of those metrics correct? How long have you been doing?
Absolutely not. I've only been doing this about 2 years.
Really? That's it?
No.
Okay.
gonna fire our research staff.
Yeah, that's right. R&D, you're all fired. So how long have you been doing little Golden Book gigs?
I want to say 7 years.
Yeah.
I think I started when my son was born was that first year. So it's about 2017, 2018.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a pretty long run. Like normally I have like 2-year to 5-year runs of kind of comfort or success, you know. So every day now I'm just like, well, this is over. Because it just keeps going.
Well, you know, it's funny, and Shane, I'm gonna put you on blast just a little bit because we were talking about like what we're going to talk about, and you know, Shane said a little bit. It was like, well, I kind of do the thing, like, and as you know, somebody who does client work, which all of us do in our own different ways. I think if we're not talking shop with other cartoonists, it's easy to just go, well, you know, I did the thing. Well, you know, and there's a million people around you who go, I can't draw I can't draw a straight line. But to us, it's Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, with that comfortability and just with your craft, you know, this is what you do, and they pay you well to do the thing. But you know, I figured we could kind of talk shop a little bit and talk about how you got to doing this Golden Book stuff. So, one thing that we like to do here on Pencil to Pencil a lot is the origin story. So I have Shane's IG account on the screen. Go check him out. A little later, we're going to put some of his images on the screen. So Shane, kind of tell us how you got involved in the cartooning world, and did you always want to be an illustrator?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny because so you guys are kind of, you call yourselves cartoonists, and then Mike obviously has a like comic history that I grew up reading or you know emulated, or that era that really kind of shaped where I was getting like serious about art, you know what I mean, or serious about trying to draw. But yeah, since I was like 6, I've been wanting to do this, and then it was just kind of one of the things like that's all I can really do. Like I don't have any kind of education, and I don't really have any other skills. So it was like, make this work or you're going to be in this kitchen forever. Like I worked in a lot of kitchens. So, and then, you know, it worked to various degrees. Like so like I failed at being a cartoonist, I failed at comic books, and then it kind of all came together in what I'm doing now, because there's a lot of, like I showed you my roughs, because that's how I would have drawn a comic, you know, 20 years ago to begin with. That would have been the initial, and then I would have just rendered it differently. But now I'm just skipping steps and coloring it. So it's everything that I've learned or failed at, you know, it all comes together now. So it's really that thing about just, you know, get in where you fit in. And lately, that's, you know, last 6 years, I've been where I feel like I fit in. Because nobody ever was like really blown away by my cartooning or my comics. You know, people weren't having me on podcasts when I was doing comics. So
right. Well, that's interesting, Shane, because we met. You said it was 15 years ago, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Which makes my back hurt thinking about that. But
I mean, I look just like this. But
you haven't aged a bit. I look like Methuselah. But
you look exactly the same. It's just this is great. That's
all right. Well, I'll take that.
That's how I remember.
Well, when I met Shane, you were doing client work, but you were doing kind of like, would you call them custom graphic novels? And this is kind of before graphic novels were really like picking up like that.
Yeah, I mean, you were you called them that, and I think that was accurate. Like I don't even remember exactly what they were called. Sometimes we were adapting books, like I did Machiavelli's The Prince. So that was, but that wasn't the bulk of that work. There was a lot of like business comics. There was a lot of like specific authors that wanted a comic. So it was similar in the way that like the X-Men 97 markets the X-Men 97 show, right? The book will market the show, and then these authors, their comic would market them as a speaker or their prose book or whatever. So it's still similar, like client work, but the context was vastly different. The content was vastly different.
So with that point when I met you, you were kind of on staff for this company that did custom comics, right? And which I thought was really, really slick. And how did you fall into that? Was that something that kind of like fell in your lap? Were you campaigning for that kind of job back then? Or
no, the guy that worked there found me, and he liked some previous comics that I did were completely unrelated, and he brought me in, and then it was like just basic freelance stuff, and then after a while, I think they put me on staff just because we were doing so much, and it was just easier to do it that way.
Was what I thought was really interesting, because this is like you said, like 15 years ago, and the term graphic novel wasn't even where it is today. And you had a lot of books on your table. I remember you had a couple.
All of those weren't mine.
Oh, okay.
I think that table which you're talking about wasn't mine.
Okay.
I think.
But
because there were other artists for sure, and there was other books that I didn't have a hand in.
That's such an interesting concept, which doesn't really seem like it's holding the same kind of water. Because if you think about kind of companies that doing like licensed comics, maybe I'm thinking of like Baywatch comics, you know what I mean, or the 18 comics. But the stuff you guys were doing were slick, and they were like, perfect
they were legit.
They're perfect bound like trades, and I was like, yo, this is 15 years ago. So
what happened? That reminded me of back in like 08, 09, everyone that had a script out in LA, they wanted a graphic novel. So they would shop around the graphic novel instead of the script. It was easier to read. And I had some work like that back then.
Yeah.
And then it just translated into this kind of business books. We did a lot of business books. So, business book might be kind of, hard to get through. And so they would distill it into a 20 or 40 page comic. And then I would do that. And I would tell this story where I would go to the dentist, and the lady would be like, "Oh, you're an illustrator," and I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Have you done anything that I know?" And I was like, "I don't know what you know, lady, but I'm sure you don't know about the long tail."
That's one of my favorite.
So now I've got this, this different set of books that, like, no matter, like, it's so broad now that somebody is something that I like, or I have something that everybody likes,
Yeah.
Now I want to go back to that dentist and be like, "Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this?" Anything yet?
That's awesome. Go ahead.
You said what you said, and when you were 6, you were gonna. Was that number picked arbitrarily, or was there something that happened at 6 that you were like, "Oh, I want to"? Oh. You find your first copy of Peanuts or something, or
I think it's just the earliest memory that I can remember specifically doing things in the era, like watching Transit Z. You guys, did you get that over here?
Yes, sir.
And then I would make little robots, and we had those little push pins that would go through the paper, and it would pop out, and that's how I made my joints and stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. Did you have when you were in school, did you have any type of like art program or art focus that you were doing, or did you draw outside of school, or did you have
I mostly did outside. That's why it took me so long to get anywhere, and that's why all my old stuff looked just like Jim Lee, and then even when I was in my 20s, everything looked like Ken Lashley. I brought some of that old stuff. I showed you some of that old stuff. That's just me copying Ken Lashley. Like if you look at it, you're like, this guy's a garbage Ken Lashley. Like I should have the garbage Ken Lashley.
Well, I think it's really. I mean, it's not funny, but it's interesting how, depending on what on ramp in your age and what kind of era was going through comics is what you latched to, and probably what you aped for a degree. Like when I was trying to get into comics, I was doing a lot of like Ben Edlund type stuff, or Doug TenNapel type stuff, or I had this like big eye, like one eye's bigger than the other eye, Goonie cartoon Bigfoot stuff. And I've really connected, and I have some secret really bad Jim Lee drawing.
Yeah, the secrets.
You'll never
Come on, man!
It.
I brought mine. I did a whole poor Jim Lee book.
So maybe let's push ahead a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about kind of like, not necessarily after I saw you, but you've had like it's a lot of time in between. So what have you been doing all this time, and kind of how did you lead into kind of like doing more client? You've always done client work. Is that kind of it is?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tried. Like I definitely tried some creator-owned stuff, and I did. So when I was trying to transition, when I had my first, so this was 10 years ago, I had my daughter, and I wanted to get into children's books. I was reading children's books. I
Yeah.
had a kid, and a lot of my stuff was more aggressive maybe than I wanted to be, or especially for my daughter. And so I started to do my own children's books to show that I could do it, to kind of transition.
Yeah.
What?
I'm smiling because I just remember that. Like, I remember we kind of caught back up, and you were doing like really slick, kind of like kids, like almost like not board books, but like picture books. And wasn't one of them was called "Stop Hitting Daddy in the Nuts"? Was that?
Well, that's not it exactly.
No, what was it called? Stop Smashing Daddy's Nuts. What was the name of the book, Shane?
Stop Smashing Daddy's Junk, I think.
Junk.
I have to look it up. Yeah. Right. So that was a Kickstarter book. So I did some Kickstarter books, and I was just trying to show that this kind of comic book guy could do other things,
So hold on a second. I was going to load up some art from your site, Shane Scribbles. But Mike and Steve, if you have anything for Shane, let me get this together.
Well, I'm sort of interested in so you were doing your own thing, which led to you working for Golden. And did you get an agent to work for Golden? Is it like, how did they, find them, or they find you?
It was the other way around. Like ironically, the same agent that I have now at Shannon Associates. I tried for years to get them to pick me up, and like I didn't even communicate. I don't even know. Like you would fill out a thing on the form, so I don't even know if they were consistently rejecting me. But then I got the Golden Book stuff, and they just happened to be in the office, and somebody I knew there gave them, my card and yada yada, and then they ended up taking me on then. So it was kind of the opposite of what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to get an agent to get work, and I got work to get an agent.
I see. So that you got the work, and then the agent goes, "Hell yeah, I'll take 20% of that."
Well, they got me other work that they got the 20% of, but it's the same thing. You got to do the stuff to show you could do the thing. So this agent was like, "Oh, well, obviously he could do the work," and
it's sort of like a catch-22 in a way.
Yeah, it is exactly like catch-22.
So you were with another client, or you were actually doing? So how did you meet your editor at Golden Book who said yes?
So long story short, it was just a guy that wrote a book on Instagram, and he wrote one of the Golden Books, and I was messing around with some Marvel stuff, and I said, "Hey, if you ever need an artist, let me know." And he ended up not just being a writer, he ended up being an AD. And he was like, "Actually, we are trying to shift the style, because the style in the Marvel books was vastly different than what I was doing. And I really was just like making a joke. You know what I mean?" And so that's how that happened. It was just like right place at the right time and luck. And, a lot of artists don't like to hear that, but that's what happened to me. So like if I told you like, "Oh, this is how you get ahead," it wouldn't work again. I couldn't do it again. It just happened to be luck.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, that like 10 people might be working for Golden Books, and each person got in the door in a different way. There's no one way anymore for people to do stuff. And then it's sort of funny, because when you're trying to get in, it feels like nobody wants you to get in. And then once you're in, then it seems like everybody's like, "Oh yeah, look, hey, you want to do this?" It's like this weird, like you think that there's gatekeepers, or younger people think that there's gatekeepers, but it's really, like you said, the preparation meeting opportunity.
Yeah. And then it's just, like I was thinking about before this, I was thinking about how I got the Star Wars book was just because I had done the Skeletor book. And if that art director's style didn't happen to line up with what I was doing, and he just didn't happen to walk past the other art director's desk and happen to see Skeletor, like there's so many things that, and I try to get Star Wars for years. Like, everybody wants to work on Star Wars, and it was just, nobody thinks like, "Oh, I'm going to draw Skeletor and then I'll get to do Star Wars." It doesn't, So And you just got to keep moving forward and just try, I think, and just try not to worry about it and try not to make things happen. And it'll just, because you can't, I don't think.
Well, I also think that being stylistically flexible, obviously, is like a real key, because if you just do if you just do the big, one eye big, other eye small, and you draw everything like that, then you're sort of like, maybe
I feel like that was a subtle shot at somebody. I don't know. I feel like I heard somebody say that.
Yeah, shot fired, Mike. All right, I feel that.
Because when you meet younger artists, they might have a really extreme style. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work, because if it's so extreme, it's like you really have to find if it fits. And I'm looking at your work, and you're obviously very stylistically flexible.
Yeah, thank you.
You know,
and a lot of that is just the art directors too, or the licensor. You know, they come in and they tell you to change things. If you can't do it, then you're off the book, I guess, is what would happen.
Right.
But like with like this piece here, a marble book, do they establish a style first, or do you pitch something and they go, okay, I like that?
So this specific one's a unique situation. 99% of the time, they come to you with a style guide and the style and everything is situated. With this one, they didn't have that preschool Spider-Man yet. So I pitched them some styles, and then they tweaked it a little. And then years later, they had their preschool Spidey and his amazing friends. If you can follow what I'm saying. So, but then every book I've done after that, they brought me the Spidey and amazing friends first and said, draw like this. So,
and Shane, how many times have you been up against kind of like a style guide and you're like, yeah, I don't know if this one's for me?
Absolutely never, because everything I've ever seen has been perfect and fantastic.
I feel that, and I think there's some good. That's great. 99.
You know what? In all honesty, the only thing that's happened has been I'll get, like, some licenses will have multiple style guides from multiple eras or iterations, and there might be one that I like better, and then they'll be like, no, we're not doing that one, we're doing this one. So it's not like this is garbage or I don't like it, but there's definitely some other things I like better.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say that one of the things that I've noticed is that, because in the 80s, I did a lot of licensed character stuff. And licensing has really evolved quite a bit. Like, I did a lot of stuff for Western Publishing, which was like a division of Golden Books. And, you know, Golden Books had, like, Disney was like one of their biggest licenses. And so Disney was always very particular about everything looking on model, right? But then I would do like Centurions or whatever the new toy show would be, and they would send you like some model sheets, and a lot of times I actually had to buy toys to try to figure out like how these things look, because the model sheets were not like solving all the problems you had to solve. So have you actually had to do stuff like that?
I think it answered your question. Like, yeah, I have, but then they go, no, this isn't right, and then they find the angles that I needed. You know?
Okay.
It's not every licensor. There's a degrees of concern. You know, sometimes I just go through and just basically do whatever I want, I think, and it's fine. And other times I think I'm doing exactly what they want and it's not fine. So it's just, you know.
Yeah, I remember buying, was it Dino Riders? You remember that? Dino Riders?
Yeah. Vaguely, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I did some coloring books. So, because that was a TV show. So I went and bought some of the toys. And of course, you know, you look at the toy and then you look at the model sheet, and the toy sometimes is like, has nothing to do with the with the model sheet, because my first job at Marvel was Transformers. So I did the same thing. They gave you model sheets, and then you look at the car, and you go, "That does, Optimus Prime does not look the same in the cartoon
Right.
But
this toy."
that's challenging anyway, though, adapting those the way the toy robot looks into, you know, the show or whatever. That's challenging anyway.
Oh yeah. So I know how hard that is, because one of the things about licensing is you never know what your next job. So it might be Spider-Man, or it might be X-Men, or it might be. Have you done any Disney? Have you done Disney stuff?
Not the main Disney stuff. I did some Nightmare Before Christmas package art, but I haven't.
And
Not yet. Not
that
yet.
Avengers piece looks a lot like that. What was it? The Disney Infinity?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the toys. Yeah, like what do you call it? The reality toy game, or whatever those things were called. Right, where you put the guy on the
Life. It
desk.
was called Toys to Life.
Toys to Life. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is all digital. And did you start digital and then moved it? Were you traditional and then moved to digital, or were you always digital?
No, I definitely started traditional, like most people, and I just never got the hang of like inking and like brushwork, and then I started to do some roughs digitally, and then I would ink with like a micron. So I still didn't really get the hang of it, but I could just manage with those pens, and then after that, then I went all digital, and I think like it made me better too, in the way that like I had less anxiety about things. You know, there's no like money involved when you waste a page, or because I had like just boxes of empty pens, and I did not have the money for those kinds of supplies. So then when I got the iPad, it really helped just elevate my work and what I could do technically, and then what I could do with my own kind of talent or whatever ability.
And I suppose, like you said, if you, like on this piece, let's say you paint that guy's head and you don't like it, you probably have the drawing underneath that, and you can go, "Oh, I'm gonna repaint it."
Exactly.
I gotta like redraw it on another piece of Bristol board and all that. Yeah. And then I guess
I'm the guy that it'll be like this, and it'll be like done, and it'll be fine, and I'll go in and do like one stupid thing and ruin the whole, like, that's so.
Do you feel like working digitally, especially with kind of like some of the effects you're doing on this piece, kind of leads you to experimenting more in a different way? It's like you're not going to be whipping a toothbrush spatter across this, knowing if that won't work, and you're stuck.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think there's less happy accidents this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I don't make happy accidents. I make accidents.
So let's talk a little bit about navigating, because I think it's a question a lot of young artists have starting out. It's like getting an agent, working with an agent, talking to the agent, and the agent going like, "Well, I think you're good with this," or "What do what are you interested in do?" Or "This is all we have. If you're up for," like, how did you develop your relationship with your agent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, because it's obviously in a relationship there's the two people, so we haven't really talked about how they view me or feel about me per se. So yeah, I think though, because of, if I had to get, because I've already did these types of things, and I already did these types of things when they brought me on, they just kind of got me more of that.
Right.
And so when there's somebody looking for that kind of a thing, and so if I wanted to branch out, or if I wanted to try to do different things, I'd have to come to them and say, "Hey, I want to be this guy now," and they're like, "Oh, we always saw you as this guy." So that's what I think. And even in terms of like, they might come to me for things that are technically vastly different than anything that I've done, but maybe the content's the same, So then I said, well, you've drawn birds. Do you want to do this for the Smithsonian? And I'm like, I don't do photorealistic pencil work. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I would try to figure it out, and then I would, it might be that kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it's. I think that's a question a lot of young artists have, is like how to navigate that whole. Because it's one thing to just send your stuff out and hope you get an agent, but so like if you said you wanted to change your, not necessarily your style, but you wanted to do something different, do you say, hey, look, I'm hungry for, I don't want to just eat pizza, I want to try Mexican, I want to try,
I think for me the thing would be that you're not consuming the thing, you're making the thing. So if you're the taco guy, you need to make some burgers so you can say, hey, look, I can make burgers too. You can't just say, hey, I'm tired of making tacos. You have to show them. So that's what I would do. If I had an agent, which I do, but if I wanted to change, I would just do the thing and then bring them that and say, look, I want to branch my portfolio out in this way. And can we upload this? And can you shop this around instead of this, or instead of exclusively this?
Right.
That's why I haven't done that. I don't know how that would work, but that's what I would do if I wanted to.
Right. Because I know, like in a traditional, say, like fine art gallery, let's say if you're known for doing still lifes, and then you bring in a bunch of nudes, they'd be like, "Well, but you're the flower painter. Well, we got these these figurative pieces. I'm not so sure. We'll put one in your next show and see, how it."
And I would expect that conversation to go like that. And I expect like my agent to be like, we already got 100 nudes, guys. You're the children's book guy. Do what we want you to do. Like, and that can always happen,
Right. And do you talk to so you have your agent who, say, puts you in touch with, let's just say, Penguin, and then you get the manuscript, and then you're talking to the art director. You're not really dealing with your agent anymore, right?
Right. Unless something goes wrong. I think even that's what my agent would say. The one time I talked to him, he was like, yeah, we're never talking unless something's going wrong. So
right, everything's fine while the plane's flying smooth, right? So Shane, I have a couple of questions about just living in this licensing project heavy world. I've been talking to some other cartoonists lately about maybe the pitfalls or maybe benefits of being typecast of a style, right? Like say, again, like, you're a capes and boots guy, right? Or so we're not going to ask you to do this World War II thing, or you've drawn 18 books of a talking hamster. You're not going to do like Iron Man next. Does that bother you in somebody in an illustrator's field where it's really, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but feeling like a gig is going to come in and I need a gig, so I'll take the gig. So is it a bad thing to go, oh man, another chicken and the egg book, or another Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs book? I'm sick of these.
Right.
Do you have the
I will
things
say,
that go through your head?
I think if I had to, so again, this is some of the things where you're asking me things that I can't speak for other people, right? But what I gather from other conversations, I think that my stereotype, if I'm stereotyped for anything or typecast for anything, is just like the texture. So I don't think it's like you're a superhero guy.
Okay.
It's like you're the texture guy. So whenever I try to get like smooth, they're just like, what are you doing, man? You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Because they're kind of looking for the finish with your work.
Right? Yeah, the like the feel of it, the vibe or whatever, And I don't think that they've been too much like, and I feel like Marvel kind of suffered a little bit after COVID, right? Like after Infinity War or whatever, it didn't do as well. And I did have some concerns about what was going on. And then somehow I got Sesame Street. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You don't give Sesame Street to the Marvel guy. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I feel like if I had been stereotyped into that, way. And I know I did get some jobs because I was a superhero guy, you know, or I had done superheroes, but it's just the ease of like apples to apples. So everybody above me has people above them. And so I have to sell myself to them, and then they have to sell me to them. And so if I have a superhero, they can sell a superhero to whoever's above them, and it's just easier for everybody. You know?
They don't have to imagine it. They don't have to. They can see it.
They don't have to ask people. Okay, so look at this guy's Golden Girl work, and imagine if that was Wolverine. You know what I mean? They don't have to do that. They're like, so look at Elmo. Imagine if that was a Wookiee. You know,
Right.
So,
And I think it's more that way now than it was when I started, because when I was doing the activity books, you know, I did all kinds of stuff. I did like I said, like, you know, Centurions and Dino Riders, but then I also did Barbie, and I also did like Tiny Toons, and I did all kinds of stuff. So it seemed like the people I worked with then go, okay, you're like you're like a utility player, right? Like you can do a Disney thing. You could do, now it seems like when I did some Star Wars stuff, I had to become a Star Wars artist. I had to be approved, and then I had to like do a sample for these Star Wars kids books. And it was very different than when I did stuff years ago. So I think like not everybody had a licensing department in the way that they do now. Like Warner Brothers has a licensing department, DC had a licensing department, Marvel has a licensing department. All these companies have people that work in licensing, some as art directors or people who are, you know, in charge of things. That's really built up over the last like 20, 30 years from the way it was, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's whole rooms of people, from what I've gathered, that their whole job is just to check stuff that other artists do, or illustrators, or whatever, things on mugs, whatever. Like, and that's for all of them. Like, I don't think I've ever worked with somebody that didn't have a licensing department.
So how much of when they're in these projects, and what's the review process? I mean, is it something where you submit it and then it's like, okay, it's gonna be in 2 months, I'll find out what they think, or what's that kind of timeline you play with?
It can be, it can be a lot, and you know, sometimes it's like they have 2 weeks and it'll come back in 3 months, and then they have to reschedule the whole thing, or the re-release, or you know, so you know, I mean, it just depends on the book and the licensor and the time of year. And
so do you have multiple books cooking at the same time?
Yeah, I try to. Yeah, because that's the only way to do it. Like, the best thing for me is if I can leapfrog, if I could pencil one, get it in review, and then color the last book, and then this one comes back, then I color it, and while that's out for review, I pencil the next one. Like, if I keep that going, then that's a good year.
That's
so
like
if I'm sitting around waiting on stuff to come back, it's not a good year.
It felt like a game of Burger Time. You run it across.
It is, man.
And making the lettuce fall.
So what is the average timeline of working on one of those books?
Yeah, so I would say the last couple of years, and since COVID, has been kind of up and down and all over the place. But it used to be like, for me, was like anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months. And it was really quick before COVID. Like, I would get a job and I would be able to see it on a shelf in like 3-4 months.
Wow.
And now I'm doing stuff that's coming out in 2025, or, you know, stuff that's coming out this summer I did a year and a half ago, and now it's all over the place. But and even within the same publisher and within the same licensors, between different publishers, like, it's just, there's zero consistency for me right now, or for the last few years.
Well, that sounds like a really quick turnaround, though. You know, you said a couple of weeks, so that has you grinding stuff out. But has your kind of like the commitment to your process changed with it taking longer for them to put it out? Are you still bringing stuff in at the same deliverable time,
No,
and it takes
no.
them longer to put it out?
I just spend more time with my kids and at the beach, man. I don't put more work into it. No, and that's
Yeah.
just I don't want to change it up. Like if it's working, I
Right.
don't want to just be like, now this book is way different because I had twice as long, and then the next one I'll have half as long, and it's gonna look different. Like it's just, you know what I mean? Like if
Right.
it's working, I have the same
Yeah.
approach. I have the same approach to it, I think. And the content dictates with the time I put into it. I mean, like the Golden Girls had 4 people, at every page at most, and then the X-Men's got 9. Every
Mhm.
spread was like every X-Man does this, and I'm just like, come on, man. Like
That'd be a
they don't
perfect
all
time.
have to be in every spread.
Like what was it, Richard Scarry or whatever, where you got all the characters. Yeah.
Was it Trouble Town or whatever those things are called? That's great. So this is a perfect time for me to put your. I took your X-Men samples because this is kind of like your roughs for X-Men '97. Thanks for sharing this with us. And we're just going to kind of go through this. So maybe maybe before we get started or after, I know Steve, there's a couple of stars in the thing. Maybe we can ask a couple of questions and then start to go through this.
Yeah, we've covered a couple of them, but we got this one from Tim Fielder. And it's talking about the process. I don't know if you want to dig deeper into this a little bit, but Tim on Facebook says, love the He-Man covers. They have this painterly quality to them that's endearing. Is this digital or analog? Do you want to talk about your process a bit? Like that you mentioned working on the iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all digital. Yeah. So and I don't want to say any more than that and give away how the sausage is made. It's all proprietary brushes, and no, I just I don't know. Like I studied what they were doing 8 years ago with golden books and tried to emulate that kind of gouache look and dry brush, and Procreate had some brushes and I tweaked them, and it's not even that complicated or that deep, and I don't even know how it looks. Like people always comment on it, and I'm just doing what everybody does. I don't know why mine looks any different, but
yeah, I mean your sensibility is there. And were you at the beginning of your projects kind of working with golden, did you go back into the archive and look at some of like the classic books trying to kind of replicate
absolutely.
the feel?
Well, and even more so what was out then, because I was trying to get work now. You know what I mean? So I was trying to do what was working now and what was popular now. And then we ended up like, so I went to Random House and the Golden Books people, and we did one style, one approach, and we submitted it to Marvel, and they were like, no. And we completely changed everything. So if you see my original sample to anything I've done since I've been working with it, is vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like to what Mike said, like that flexibility. Like they kept coming back with different things, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Sure. You know what I mean? Like what's important to me is that I get the job, not that I draw a certain way, because I could do that on the weekends. That's what I always said. Like weekends is for drawing Elmo your way. Monday through Friday is drawing Elmo their way. So if it really bothered me that much, I would do it on the weekend. So.
That's fantastic. Because I mean, I guess I had questions about doing licensed work and even just keeping things on model, aside from your feedback from licensing or from legal, if it gets down to that.
Yeah.
Because I know there's no space for you to freestyle it, but also, Shane, I hope you could talk a little bit about how, I don't have a phrase for it, but how you kind of kidify the characters. Like even we're looking at this X-Men stuff, and it's X-Men, yes, and it's on model, yes, but it has a different vibe to it than say the cartoon or the comics. So how do you figure out how that's going to feel?
So here is the secret. My style is all corner cutting. So
I love it.
You can draw a hand with like every knuckle and every joint, or you can draw with one or none, or you know what I mean, whatever will get it done the quickest. Like that's how when I started, it was just you got to turn this in 3 days or whatever, in the morning. I'll get Friday night, I would get emails and they would say like, "Hey, can we have this Monday?" It's Friday at 5 or like 4:57. You know what I mean?
Everybody's nodding.
Like, so in order to do that, you know, you have to move quickly, and it just naturally started to like cut corners, and it started to like I really got into just like the simplicity of the children's book work, and when I was reading with my kids and my daughter specifically, because she's the oldest. But I was just like, man, you don't really need all these bells and whistles to convey an image, you know. And I started to just like make a personal challenge, like how little could I actually work to get the point across of what this image is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I mean, just that's like one of the greatest parts of cartooning, like the less is more approach. Like on this stuff, you doing like Jim Lee hatching that's not the
right, exactly. You're losing the comedy or you're losing the motion. Exactly, that's a perfect analogy.
Right.
Great use of that space for Storm.
Thank you. I did the same thing with Thor, so I noticed that today. I was putting his books out, and I was like, well,
was there a note like the first version? Wolverine had claws with both hands. Was that a note? Maybe make him a little less terrifying.
Let me go back to that.
All of these are notes, baby. I make no choices. I make one choice, and then I just incorporate notes.
So did they? So maybe, and this might be interesting to people who've never done license work or worked with people who tell them you're wrong. So did they give you notes from why they only wanted one hand with the claw?
Sometimes they're just like, do it, you know. And either way, it's fine with me. I mean, because what happens sometimes is when they try to justify it, it gets muddy because I'm like, well, that's not fixing the problem. You know what I mean? Like, what you told me to do is not the solution to the problem you say we're having. Then I gotta talk about it or whatever. But yeah, with this was just like you said, it's very cut and dry. Like 2 claws is too much. And,
so it was too violent, maybe. So if like 1 claws out its action, 2 claws out its violence.
And it wasn't a fist. They wanted it like an open hand with the claw. The open hand was the less aggressive. And then we had to take Professor X out because he wasn't in the show.
Right.
Yeah. Put Bishop in. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then move Bishop up. Yeah, they wanted me to move Bishop up.
We're really kind of studying this. This is really cool. Because I don't know, like a lot of people have never really looked at layouts before, or kind of like how this all, there's so much information going on in the thumbs to kind of suss out the final piece.
Well, one of the things I remember, a lot of it is age driven too. So when I would do stuff and they would say like, oh, draw, I was doing some book. It was like a sticker book. There was witches and like a Frankenstein monster or whatever. They're like, oh, the witch looks too scary.
Right.
You had to draw a happy witch because it couldn't be a scary witch. And I always remember when I used to hand out comics for Halloween, kids always want to go for the scary stuff, but it's like the publisher goes, no. You know, there's no Salem witch trial burning witches here. No, it's like everybody's the good witch and they're making cupcakes and, you know.
That's right. You can boil the children, but make it look nice.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of this is for the parents, though, too.
Right.
I think a lot, not this necessarily we're talking about, but I know a lot of the choices that are made they don't want criticism from the parents. The kids might love it, but, you know, it's the parents have to feel good about what they're buying.
Yeah, I say that about my webcomic, The Middle Age. It's that they ask, is it kid friendly? I say absolutely, but I don't know if it's parent friendly.
That's fantastic. So kind of what we're looking at here are kind of some interior spreads and kind of how you're kind of like laying out the spreads with notes from editorial. And you know, Shane, I love your composition on this stuff because even though it seems to give a lot of space, you don't have a lot of space, especially with these big heroic characters trying to do stuff and fight but not fight. It then look menacing but not dangerous.
Right.
Like there's a lot going on. So maybe can you talk a little bit about how But beyond the notes, like how are you working your illustrator brain around to make all this stuff work underneath these pressures?
You know, there's a lot of times now, like the first year was a real like trial by fire, and I learned a lot immediately, really quick. I
Hmm.
did a lot of work. I worked with a lot of different art directors, a lot of different licenses, and so I learned a lot really quick, and I just filed it away. So that some of it is just like knowing
Hmm.
who your audience is, and immediately your audience is going to be your art director,
Hmm.
and then after that, the licensor. So I will think, well, I know this art director just likes what I do, so I could kind of do what I want to do.
Hmm.
This art director has a thing about anatomy, so I'm not going to do any kind of like funny perspectives because that's just going to give you anatomy issues. So I'm going to keep it maybe more stiff or rigid or flat or
Hmm.
that like that kind of thing. So definitely keep that in mind as I'm working, and I keep in mind like different notes I've gotten. Like Marvel might be more, from anything I worked on, more concerned with like the male to female ratio. So if I'm drawing like a crowd scene, I'll go back through and I'll make sure that, I mean, some of these things I would do anyway, just to
Right.
include like diversity, but specifically,
Hmm.
gender with Marvel, I'll keep mindful of,
Hmm.
and and then and they'll still come back and say things that still don't get it right, but like all the time. But yeah, so that's how and then underneath that is all the like art stuff that you spend like decades trying to learn, like you said, like composition. How does this lead the eye, right? Like who's the main character and
Hmm.
where do you want the viewer to look, and like all that kind of basic
Hmm.
art
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
And then I just try to incorporate that as well. But luckily, I've been doing that so long that I don't have to think a ton about it, even if, I
Hmm.
get things wrong. Like I don't,
Hmm.
it doesn't take me that long to get it wrong anymore.
Uh,
So,
and there's even a thing like I'm sitting on this page because there's a lot to talk about. Even when you think about how the book opens,
right, yeah.
and like
Especially the Golden Books has a super long center, like
hmm
the gutter or whatever.
yeah.
So that impacts a lot. And you might have to put, so it's like this time I put, you can see like Wolverine's arm goes across there.
Hmm.
And 9 out of 10 times I can't do that, or they won't let me do that.
Right.
And just you try to do what works best, and then like there was another one, the Thanos one, same
Hmm.
kind of pose,
Hmm.
and Thanos is this huge imposing character, and I felt like he should be able to go across the gutter there. His arms are long enough, but
Right. Right.
it just didn't fly for whatever reason.
One other thing before we leave this, just to put people watching in the seat of you as a illustrator. So these art notes at the bottom are from editorial, right?
Yeah, I hope it's okay that I didn't even notice it was on there, to be honest with you. I thought it was
Oh,
just a
oh,
pencil drawing,
my
so
fault. I
I
forget.
hope it's okay.
We're just kind of like going, then I watched it.
It seems pretty, it's not like any
Yeah,
secret stuff.
no,
It's just like Wolverine attacking Sabretooth, so I hope it's okay.
right. So but the notes are really slight, but all of this
Hmm.
heavy lifting is up to Shane. You know what I'm saying? Like we're in the forest.
Well,
Wolverine's
right, but I'm not sharing with you the review notes. Those
no,
are
no,
more
no,
in
no,
depth.
no. Yeah, no, but I just think it's interesting that people see this is kind of how you're. Basically, we're all visual problem solvers, right?
Hmm.
And you're given this information, and then you have to deduct it and then execute it, right? And that's really what we're looking at here. From this little like 2 lines of words is going to create this illustration,
Hmm.
which I think is
Yeah, I
really
like that better myself. Like sometimes they'll be very, and I'm sure you've all have read comic scripts that are like very descriptive and very exact. Like this character in the bottom left of this panel
hmm
takes up
hmm
1/10 of this page, and you're just like, dude, why am I here? Why don't you just draw it? You know what I mean? So I like this stuff where it's like Wolverine in the woods. I'm like, yeah, I got you. Like that's why I'm here. You
right,
know what I mean?
right. Say less. I got it. All right. Yeah, that was really cool. Um, yeah. And are there any differences? We talked a little bit about the licensors and all that. Have you, in your time working with all these different types of people, found that one group is a little less is a little more lax than another, or are they like, oh, you know, this is a kids thing, you can kind of, you have more freedom, but versus
Right.
this was going to be on TV, it'd have to be exact.
I think most of them are about this. It might vary by publisher, but I will tell you, like Sesame Street is like, as you can imagine, like the most strict, like they're the most like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can't do
Mm-hmm.
100 things, you know.
Right.
And what's crazy about it is because the way, to me, what's crazy about it is because of the way like society, you know, grows and changes is like everything they tell me I can't do. I've got 20 books that they've done it, but they're
Right.
like 30 years old. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we don't do that
We don't do that
anymore.
anymore. Right.
You know, and I'm
You
always
did
like,
all that
oh
before I
man.
met you. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, this is great stuff.
But I used to like we talked about some of this stuff before, just personally, where like I try to be socially conscious of some of the things that I portray, and
Mm-hmm.
Sesame Street being so serious about all this actually alleviates some of that stress
Mm-hmm.
for me. Like I don't have to worry about it at
Mm-hmm.
all because they're gonna catch everything, you
Right.
know.
Right. So it's got to like give you a bit of breathing room. Oh, look, there's the color. That's cool. Um, well, I know we were going to try to keep this to a real strong finish. Steve, do you want to get through those questions and
Yeah,
then?
we have one other here. And this is kind of a big question. By the way, I just love that sharp highlight you put on the figures. Just love it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
thank
We've got a question here from Francis on the YouTube. What's your favorite thing you ever worked on?
Oh, all of them. They're all like my children. No, you know, in all seriousness, I do enjoy the breadth and diversity I've been able to do. And you know, there's young kids in various backgrounds and older people of various backgrounds, and there's always something that, you know, they get excited about, and that's fun to me. And I don't have to spend like years on it, you know. Like if you do a Marvel comic, that's, you know, 6 months to a year of your life, and that's what you're doing, you know.
Right.
So I can work on Marvel and Golden Girls and, you know, it's a Nickelodeon show or whatever, you know, and just be different things, and then different families have different experiences, and different people have different experiences with these books. Sometimes it's a, you know, a parent reading to a child, and sometimes it's some collector that just loves that franchise. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then that in that way, it really isn't. There's one that's more that I like more than anything else. I mean, I'm always going to be a Marvel guy. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
what started this for me, you know. So, like if I could work on Marvel the rest of my life for at least a little bit here and there, like I'd be happy about that.
When you said when you're working on the stuff on the weekends for yourself, are you working in a style similar to this, or are you doing something different? Are you breaking out the
I
brushes and?
Yeah, I try to do something different. It's still digital, but yeah, I try to just do different things. And like it's hard to get out of that work mode, you know. And I think about like what Jamar said earlier, where I don't want to be pigeonholed as this muscle guy, and so I'll try to do something like, you know, cute rabbits or something. You know what I mean? Like I'm always trying to branch out or experiment or try different things. Or
This is
We, and
fancy.
we have another question from Nathan on YouTube. What is a property that you haven't worked on yet but would love to do next?
oh, what was
Thanks
that?
for the question, Nathan.
I definitely want to do like a Disney thing, and there's been some that I have wanted to work on that I didn't get, that I probably can't say
Yeah.
that I didn't get them. but but yeah, I mean, I would like to do like some mainstream Disney things, you know, like there's a Moana 2's coming out, or you know, some more Nightmare Before Christmas stuff that, you know, more than just a package art, or definitely some of that stuff. Monsters University, Monsters Inc. I love
Mm-hmm.
those things, so I would love to do that for sure.
What's the fan community for Golden Books like?
Oh, it's super, super diverse. That's what I like about it too. Like you guys would talk about like going into comic shops, and sometimes you go in there and there's like six dudes that look like you. If you know, if you're lucky, it's only six, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing with Golden Books is it's super diverse. And then for me, I've been lucky again with the franchises I've worked with. It's been a lot of, you know, I don't know that I want to call people out, but certain types of people gravitate towards certain types of books, and those people aren't always the same per book. And so I get a lot of like different people, and I think I think that's great. Like I really enjoy that. And then none of them are like me, mostly. I mean, there's definitely a percentage that are around my age or in my demographic, but so I really appreciate that.
Mm.
That's great.
Was there any other?
No, I think we cleared out the questions. This is one of those ones where as soon as the art goes on the screen, the chat gets real quiet. I think.
Yeah, good. That's good.
Yeah.
Oh well,
that's why I'm here.
Well, here's a question, and I don't know if you got to this one, Steve. I've been ADHD, but Eternity Forever. What up, Eternity? Now we talked a little bit about we know that your workflow is digital, but and you're not working like in physical space. But is there maybe like a difference in maybe formatting for some of the books you're working on? Or are all the golden books always the same format? I'm not really.
The golden books are the same. Yeah,
okay, so you can just kind of go back to the template and kind of hit all those notes. Well, to that question, Shane, do you kind of finish in another program? Like, do you go into Photoshop at all to kind of like mess with some things, or is it all straight Procreate?
Yeah, I only go to so Procreate and the iPad will only do RGB, and then printing is CMYK. So I always go into Photoshop to convert it, and that's it. And even sometimes I don't even have to do that. Like the art director might do it, depending on how much time we have and the art director. So yeah, I try to avoid when you send me this thing and you were like, you need a laptop or a computer, and I was like, I got nothing.
Does working on the iPad complicate that with like downloading? And I mean, it's not as easy as a laptop. So
yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on what your goal is and what's easy. When I was doing this like 10-ish years ago, 12 years ago, like I had to get out of the house, man. I had the iMac and the Cintiq, right? I had that giant, and I was just stuck at a desk, and I was doing comics, which it's a 12-hour grind every day. So I had to get out. So then that was my main motivation for switching to the iPad. Like any kind of hardship you might cross with working on technical on the iPad is worth it to me. Just being able to get out and go other places.
And the pencil, the drawing with the pencil, there's nothing that compares to it. Like it's so far that's like the best stylus they have, and I love that. So responsive, so smooth.
I feel the same way. Like I think it's just a superior drawing program. Like Photoshop has a lot of bells and whistles, but you're just trying to draw. You don't need 98% of that.
Right.
And the Cintiq, like you were saying, like the stylus is a half inch off of your canvas because the glass is so thick. Like, yeah. So even if I wasn't desperate to leave the house, I would have still preferred this. It feels much more intuitive to me.
Sorry.
Steve, you're going to do Mimi.
Yeah, I think we got one last question sneaking in under the wire from YouTube. We got Mimi, who asks, are there any particular artists you study to learn your texture painting style?
I was worried this question was going to come up.
That's a good question.
And I was going to like forget people.
You better step out.
What's that?
That's what I thought.
Screen is freezing.
Can't hear you. Go through a tunnel.
Because the people on Instagram, they like, even when I know their name and I see them mostly as like whatever their handle is, and then I forget what their name is. Yeah. And so there were a lot. Like I know Luke Flowers is somebody I like a lot. Steph Ladaris, I like her work a lot. There's maybe like half a dozen people that were doing golden books when I started like studying it, or doing children when I started studying it, and I really enjoyed their work. And then some of them that did the specific books that I liked a lot. Like I gotta look this up. I'm gonna mix it up. I'm gonna mix it up, so I gotta look it up.
And while Shane is looking it up, this will be a perfect time for you guys to follow Shane on Insta at Shane Scribbles. And then when you're done with that, like this session, why don't you, and subscribe and drop kick the alert button so you get notified when we have another program coming. Thank you. Thank you.
It doesn't even say the artist name on this, man.
What do you think about that? Because it seems very typical now. The people don't go by their name; they go by some handle, and then
right. I think it's fine if they do it across. Like if you're going to use whatever on your social media and then use that on the books, it's fine with me. Like I can remember one name across both things, but I can't remember this series of numbers and your hometown and whatever you're using is Bob Smith on your books. You know what I mean? Like it's too much for me. That's not too much pressure on me, too much respect to me.
Well, go ahead, Mike.
So I was going to say, so who were there, specific guys you looked at in the beginning? You were like, I like this person's getting texture, this person's getting color, this, because you can get like super saturated colors digitally that you cannot get traditionally, right? And do you have like a and I suppose it's different for every book, right? Like the aesthetic is different on X-Men than it would be for Muppet Babies, right? Or Sesame Street.
Yeah, but I put for me, and this is what works and helps me keep going, is that I put the same veneer on different drawings. So I don't change up my rendering style too much so that I can keep the machine moving, and that makes a different drawing. If you make a muscle arm and you render it the same as a noodle arm, well, you still got two different drawings, right? It's two very different styles. So that's how I approach it. But
I see,
that's beautiful.
I like it. All right, guys, I want to honor the time. We have a hard stop tonight, so we're going to start wrapping this up and start to say our goodbyes as I drop the landing gear down. Instagram.com. Is that a forward or backslash? Shane Scribbles. And this is the time of the program where pencils down. Pencils down, guys. I also love when we have a moment to look at art. Right. Some of the sessions we just say, hey, go to the website. But then also sometimes we're like, here it is. You can look at it. And I think that kind of like visceral connection works really, really well. And Shane, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. I think, Shane, you got a whole bunch of fans who showed up tonight. Maybe some of them are new. And
I was worried I was going to burn some bridges. It's still early. We'll see.
Yeah, well, we got a couple minutes left. And Shane, is your is your junk still for sale? Is Stop Smashing Daddy's junk? Can people still cop that online?
I should do like a 10-year anniversary. My daughter just turned 10. I should do like a 10-year anniversary version of that.
Can people? Is that book still on the market? Can you still pick that up?
I think it's still on Amazon. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Go support Shane.
I actually get money on that one.
Oh, nice.
The other stuff is like, you get paid a flat fee, but this one I'll get a couple bucks from Amazon.
Yeah, let's go support the man. Why don't you? Mike, any last words for our guests doing a lot of client work over here?
I'm just saying I enjoy talking to you. I think, like I said, hearing your experience and comparing it with my experience, some things are the same, but it seems like licensing is like a really big thing now, because that's how everybody makes all this money. That's how all the companies make all their money. It's like SpongeBob made like $1 billion or something, and most of that came from licensing. Somebody sitting in a room like you drawing SpongeBob.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like licensing. Just to wrap it up, because that's what we were talking about. But I grew up in Germany, and it would be like me and the German kids, and we knew who He-Man was. We couldn't say 4 words to each other, but we knew who He-Man was. So I like licensing. It brings together. It's an easy sell. It's not a hard sell. Like if you have an original concept and it's about something, some loftier ideas, and then
So we found your junk.
At least you said Amazon and not OnlyFans. Got me fired from X-Men.
That's fantastic. Yes, we found your junk. It's a 7% off on Amazon. Go get it. All right, you guys, we're gonna wrap this up.
It's a real thick book, let me tell you.
I'm sorry, Steve. I cut you off. Steve, do you have any last words for our guest?
No, it's great to meet you. I love your work. It's so
Thank you.
It's
Thanks
so clean. It's so the designs are excellent. I just like the shapes of the figures, the way you puzzle piece them all together. It's excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. A lot of that's just necessity, to be fair. I can't take credit when you have 20 people being like, move this here, don't do this, don't do that. And you're like, hey, this is what we got. And it works out. So
and I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And Shane, you and I go way back, and I'm totally one of your biggest fans, and I love the success.
Same, man. Thank you.
And just keep it moving, man. I love to have you back on a little bit in the future. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. Absolutely. All right, hang out for a minute, Shane. We got to do our goodbyes, guys. You've been watching Pencil to Pencil. This was live without a net. We're experts at this. You could tell. We will be back next week. We don't have a guest yet, but that may change. And if you are liked and subscribed and alerted, you'll know before anybody else who that will be. So for my co-host, for our guest, Shane Clester, guys, I think we might be at the end times. This may be the end of days, but I think before we all go into our fallout shelters, I think it would behoove us to come on, Shane, get it together. The wash your Kirby hands. Here you go. Let's see them Kirby hands. Nice. And find shelter.
This is the one that I do all the time.
Oh, that's the shade. You got that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hold on. Yeah.
They're gonna think you
I'll trace it. I'll just trace it. This one. I'll trace this one.
Oh, that's a good one. I had to count your fingers for a second. All right, guys. Let's get out of here. Thanks. Have a great night, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, man. You too. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Good night.